All thoughts and views without judgment. Please join today's conversation by calling 415-663-8492 or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR.
And your hosts today are Robin Carpenter leading the conversation, Mary Frank answering the phones, and I'm Paul Riffel.
When you call in and hear the phone ringing, please hang on. When you hear me say you're on the air, please give us your first name, turn down your radio, and please watch your language.
Today we're talking about nostalgia, an imagined past, and asking how you feel about nostalgia and whether or not nostalgia is a great thing of remembering things in a way that brings you comfort, or whether it leads you to delusion, to actually not being grounded in what really happened and what you're trying to recreate, if you are trying to recreate some nostalgic place. I thought it was interesting to look at the word nostalgia is a Greek compound word consisting of nostos, meaning homecoming, a Homeric word, and algos, meaning pain and ache, which was coined by a 17th century medical student to describe anxieties displayed by Swiss mercenaries fighting away from home.
Really?
Really? That's what it says. You don't believe Wikipedia? So I thought it was an interesting... Actually, the concept had come up from Murray Seward and about talking about nostalgia or the past, and we'd been meaning to talk about that, and I felt that with what's going on right now with the, I know I always bring up politics, but
Hard not to.
I'm trying not to on my Facebook page, but talking about, this whole concept of Make America Great Again, and the people that particular campaign appeals to, what their lives are like, and I've been thinking a lot about that because one of the things that really irritates me about my fellow left-wing liberal friends, including myself, is, us not listening to what it is that these people are really concerned about and why it appeals to them. And anyway, oops, I'm sorry, I'm getting distracted by something.
Well,
Go ahead, Paul, you fill in.
I thought it was interesting that they, who was it? It was The Late Show or somebody, or Full Frontal or one of those political satire shows actually asked Trump supporters as they were coming out of the convention, like, when was America great? Where are we going back to? And the one guy said, when they wrote the Constitution. And you go, okay, except for the slavery thing.
Yeah.
Well. And, or 1913 was a good year, apparently. Somebody wanted to go back to that. But nostalgia, I mean, with every generation, isn't it about childhood and growing up memories and smells and tastes and mommy?
But go ahead.
I was thinking, as a child, I was never afraid to go to school. And these kids today are afraid to go to school. So, I mean, that's something I'm nostalgic about, that some of the violence could happen in a school.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about school shootings. I was thinking more of that's a class issue, but you're saying Sandy Hook was not a downtrodden urban area.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that doesn't make me, I mean, I am nostalgic about that. I don't know if it was so much that I was a child and you just don't worry as much as a child, or I feel that kids today are really worried about that. It's everywhere around them,
But see, when I was
propaganda too.
When I was a kid, I was very worried, and as I think I said on previous shows, we were issued dog tags because there were military bases on the Gulf Coast where I was growing up, and we were close to Cuba, and so we thought we were going to get nuked.
Well, yeah, but we did have the duck and cover, where you had the bomb shelters and all
those
of that.
Those were the good old days.
Yeah.
Put your notebook over your head.
Love those 50s, don't we? Well, it was so easy then, and it's like the picture that you chose for Facebook. That wonderful
happy
sort
family. And Mark Dowie had it's like a hot dog cookout. And he's like, I wish I had printed it out, but it was a hilarious thing. Like the dad saying to the kid, here, have this, pig testicles and bits wrapped in this nuclear stuff with red dye number, whatever, and have a nice day.
Mom was in the background trimming the Christmas tree or something.
Well, now, one thing, Paul, because we were just talking a little bit about some of the Trump supporters when Make America Great Again, but in one article I was reading, it was talking about that the idea of nostalgia was actually new to Americans in the 20th century because America was a new country and our forefathers were committed to progress and had a sort of never look back mentality. And Thomas Jefferson said that the past was, quote, a blind veneration of antiquity for customs and names to overrule the suggestions of our own good sense. So nostalgia was seen by the early founders as somewhat taboo and with consequences that could sort of mirror the story of Lot's wife. So if we looked back, we might turn into a pillar of salt. So so in the American mindset of the founding fathers, which is interesting because Trump supporters go back to that, it was don't look back, make progress, move forward, don't be tied into the taboos of old. But I think nostalgia, one of the reasons we have that is it is a comfort to sort of in our memories rewrite things or leave things out that were there before.
Editing the past. Leave only the good bits. And nostalgia, again, in the political sense that we're talking about here, is mostly when white people had it so good, right? I mean, that's...
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because...
And women, we just got to vote not too long ago.
Well, so it seems to me that they're talking like this, like we go back to the picture again with Dad in his chinos and, on a Saturday afternoon, everybody's happy, it's sunshine, you're in your beautiful little garden with the perfectly manicured lawn. It's
as
all
long as
very
you're white
50s.
and middle class.
Right. Yeah, it's all very 50s, harking back to the childhood of the boomers, of the... and the war, the Second World War generation. The U.S. had just helped win the war, muddle-a-dum, everything was bright and sunny, there was a car in every garage, a chicken in every pot. Well, not quite. And no votes for women. Let's see, when did that come in?
That was, we've had that about 100 years now. So that was in the 20s, I believe.
20s.
In the old 20s.
before the Civil Rights Act, before the Voting Rights Act, all that, America was such a wonderful place.
This reminds me of Charles Dickens. And it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It's like every generation seems to have wonderful things that break through and horrible things that hold us back, And
its blindness to poverty, to class, to race, and everything else that was going on for everyone else. It's a very very ideal. It can be. Let's put it this way. It can be a very idealized vision.
But we have a caller.
We do.
Caller, you're on the air.
Hi, hello, this is Richard, and
hello.
Love the topic, and I would like to make an admission here, since it's just us friends together. Yes. But my admission is that I'm an absolute fan of Norman Rockwell and his wonderful paintings, which are, as we all know, these idealized renditions of an America that seems so perfect and so pure.
Yeah.
And many of those are so moving that at least I would like to just step right into that painting. But as some of you have already pointed out, you'd be stepping into an era where racism was rampant in the supposedly liberal Northeast where I grew up. It was rampant, not even questioned. The ads in the paper were segregated by men and women. That was not even questioned. So you have to be, if you want to indulge in nostalgia, which of course I do, as you know, live an active fantasy life and love to indulge in nostalgia. Maybe the way to do it, if you want to do it, is you have to be somewhat selective. In other words, I'm thinking of the restoration that we did out at the RCA station, which now is a area of what we call time travel, where you just can step into this room and you see things and hear things and see people doing things that most of us would have thought were gone decades ago. And we do that to keep those skills alive and keep those memories fresh. And thereby honor the people who are men and women who were our heroes during that time. But
is there interest from the younger generation? Is there a new generation of tappers out there? I don't know if that's what you call yourself.
It's an interesting question, Paul. When the first kids, the visit of the first kids was organized, we accepted that reluctantly because we were sure we were going to absolutely bomb. Why would they possibly be interested in a bunch of geezers running around with telegraph keys? But in fact, they were fascinated. And we have the telegraph keys out there for the kids to use, or anyone to use, but the kids gravitate towards it. And the thing that we've seen time and time again is that the little boys want to pound on the key and mess around, but the little girls, they get it instantly, and within a few moments they're sending their name, and they're just doing perfectly. I don't know what it is, but...
Superior intelligence, I believe.
It's why women take 500 words to say something, and men will just say, yep, nope.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's right. So the thing that you get to see, that we have gotten to see as volunteers out there, the payment we get, and I remember it so clearly, is when some of the people who used to work at that station spent 20 years and more, many more years in some cases, at that station. That was their home, their career, and their family. And when they came back and saw that it was actually working and they could sit down at the spot where they actually sat and they could use the station just like it did when they were there. And I remember the first female telegrapher at the station, after doing that, just sliding her chair back and not saying anything, but then she said, well, who says you can never go home again? And that was big payment for the effort it took to that. So I guess what I'm saying is if you're going to literally go back in time, you're going to have to take everything that came with it, from horrible medical care to segregation to terrible housing to sexism to unquestioned discrimination against gay people, for those few little things that you see in that photo. But if you can be selective, then maybe you can bring back just the best of those things.
Good point.
Thanks, Richard.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard.
And well done out there. It's great.
Thank you. Thank you for calling.
Thank you very kindly.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You know, it's interesting because recently my husband's cousin sent us a letter from Andy, my husband's mother, to his mother, Simone. And he had found the letter. Andy's Aunt Simone passed away recently, and his mother died when Andy was just 10. So, you know, anything like that, for Andy to have sort of insight into his mother's mind or into the relationship between his mother and father. And so Mark had sent the letter to both of us, and it was really interesting because, you know, it's 3 pages, it's typed, and I love kind of letters from that time frame and before that I've read of my own grandmothers and great-grandmothers. There's this sort of equanimity that the letter writers had at that time where they kind of write about daily life details. I mean, she starts with, well, we just got this new typewriter, and I meant to write for a while, and the garden's coming in, and I'm spraying the trees, and Becky was sick again, but she's okay now, and I've got to be making the kids summer clothes, and, you know, just... And so you get this image of day-to-day life, but within it, so Andy and Mark were going, oh, how idyllic. And Andy goes, oh, I remember that summer. And I looked at it and said, oh, my God, Peter hated his job. Your mother was terrified Becky was going to die because didn't you read right there what she said? Last year, Becky was in the hospital for a week, and they never knew what the illness was and said it could come back again. Your mother talks about how she's spraying the fruit trees as much as she can, and that she sprayed the peach tree so much it's about to die, and then you guys are all eating that. And then, you know, so I looked at the letter and saw, and Peter hated his job, and she never knew when she could put dinner on the table, so she was just feeding the kids at 6:30 and felt like a widow. You know, I said, and you guys think that's idyllic? Oh my God! And then Andy said, well, what's the positive in that? You know, why do you make it so negative? And I said, what I think is really beautiful is that you and Mark remember your childhoods, because the Olmsteads were very close and all the tons of cousins, and they spent lots of time together in the summers, and they sent the cousins back and forth to each other's houses. And so Andy and Mark remember the wonderful summers.
Right.
But And the fact that the parents were going through such distress over Peter's job and work situation and inability to be home, and Louise trying to carry the whole thing herself, that what they provided and showed the kids, other than the poisoned fruit, was a really beautiful summer. So I thought that was really interesting that as an outsider, because I have no attachment to the memories, that I can see that Louise, in a very gracious, calm, elegant way, is talking about her days, but she's telling Simone, who's like a sister to her, that, things are really hard and Peter's really suffering and he kind of wants to be left alone when he does get home. And
apparently they were doing a good job of shielding the kids from all the heartache that was going on.
Were providing a lot of nice family life.
This is Let's Talk Radio with hosts Robin Carpenter, Mary Frank, and I am Paul Riffel. That's right, it's pronounced Riffel. Please call us on 415-663-8492 and tell us what colored glasses you wear. Are they rose-colored glasses? Are they blue-colored glasses? When you think back to your to what you're nostalgic about. You can also tweet us. I have the tweet box in front of me at Let's Talk on KWMR with your thoughts and opinions.
Can I just say, the one thing about that letter that I got from that is the positive thing is that it's very schmoozy and talky, and we don't see that anymore because nobody has any time. Yeah. So regardless of the contents, the pace, I really miss. People talk slower. People move slower. We didn't have faxes that made everything so instant. Or
43 syllables or whatever it is.
And, someone said, what's really wrong with today's culture is that nobody sits on the porch and shells peas with grandma anymore,
And just the fact, I'll just read a little bit. She's saying, last weekend, Peter went fishing after hemming and hawing around the house most of Saturday, worrying what the weather would be like. It finally on Monday night, we had some rain finally on Monday night when he must have been on the road home, and he brought home some lovely fish, and Cora's been eager to have some trout, and I took those over to her. Andy and Becky don't care much about fish, and Peter and I had some the weekend before, so we just gave it all to Cora, so that it's actually giving, it's her thoughts, the letter's like a conversation, and that, to type 3 pages like that, single space, she probably spent an hour or two typing the letter to Simone. And I just thought about, we all sitting at this table, remember I still had the stacks of letters when I left home and moved to California from my grandmother and my grandfather and the notes. And then Papa's letter, Mama would come at the end and add some notes of her own, and he would add on to hers. And, and just the thing of remember those blue jays that were in the back corner of the yard? Well, now the mockingbirds are there, and those little, it really gave you a feel for each other's lives, and not in the Facebook way where we pick one nice thing and post look at the great pie I made, instead of I burned the roast.
There's an intimacy about that kind of communication too, and there's a connection that comes from that kind of communication. I do miss that, and it's you have to very consciously seek that out with groups, community groups or whatever, because the daily life certainly doesn't lend itself to that pace or that level of connection.
Really, why is that? I mean, why couldn't, especially our lives,
Well, I'd seek it out, but
we're not as young as we were, and we have more time on our hands than a lot of people.
In letter writing, in and of itself, the actual act, as opposed to speaking and having coffee with someone, the actual act of writing a letter, it uses different parts of your brain, and you're thinking and you're writing and you're in motion, and I really think even a nice long email doesn't equal sort of the thing of letter writing. And and frankly, my friends do not like, when email first came around, I was like, this is the best thing ever because you can get a letter right away. And, my friends would go, why did you send me that long email? When you send me those long emails, it makes me feel pressured to write a long email back, and I don't want to. It's sorry. But, so it's an interesting thing because I think Andy thinks it's strange. If I have a tense situation with someone, I'll frequently like to have the conversation through email, because email gives you time and letters give you time to think on something.
Sure, of course.
You don't have to respond immediately. You don't have to be Aunt Simone and go like, oh my God, Peter needs to get another job. You have time to let the letter sit in and reread
it.
it.
Edit, you can redo it. It's like writing an article.
And especially if there's conflict, it's a cooler way of dealing with the issues.
Right.
The negative part is you can't really read somebody as well. But on the other hand, if what you want is clarity, it can help.
And sensitive topics. I remember a couple friends of mine, their parents, whenever they were having an argument, they would not talk. They would write back and forth.
Oh, I love that.
So they would leave. So Wallace was saying when he'd see letter sitting on the kitchen counter, and he would know that Mom and Dad were having a fight because they would leave the envelopes back and forth for each other.
Well, that's better than yelling in front of the kids.
Yeah,
I think that's better for the kids.
So Stevie Hurwitz just sent a one-liner. This year, the year the first Chevy Impala came on the market. That's what he's nostalgic about. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what a Chevy Impala is.
Oh, it's a car.
It's some kind of
car.
mammal, isn't it?
Oh, my mother had one. I called it the Starship Enterprise because it was like this big, wide bench
boat.
seat.
It was like a boat.
It was like a boat.
Yeah.
Those were the days of 5-cent gasoline. And
You just
It's like driving around in your living room,
Oh my gosh,
on your living room couch.
Before my aunt passed away, she still had an old Cadillac that my uncle had that was huge. And whenever I'd go back home, and because back home there are no curvy roads, you just have these long, flat through the swamp, wide roads.
Really?
So you're not going on curves or anything. So you can just crank up the music, and you can have all this stuff sitting next to you on the bench seat, and it's great.
Put it on, what do they call that? Where you just flick a switch and the thing drives itself.
Automatic
cruise
car.
control.
Cruise control, yes.
Yeah.
No, it didn't have that.
I never had cruise control when I was a kid. And Elizabeth Black wrote in and said, it's probably a no-brainer to say that the imagined past and any romanticized attempt to reclaim it will only benefit those who had power and privilege in the past, white men of a higher socioeconomic status. There you are.
Yeah, and I just want to quote what Rika brought. She said this comment on our Facebook page. She said, quoting David White, she said, nostalgia is not an immersion in the past. Nostalgia is the first enunciation that the past as we know it is coming to an end. It's kind of interesting.
Oh, that's interesting because, for me, and I like the original definition of nostalgia has with it this pain, a twang of pain. And when I was back home for most of the month of May in New Orleans and Mobile, everywhere I went and everything I saw, it was like I was having pre-nostalgia because I knew how much things were changing because of climate change with all these places that I loved and already places that had gone or were underwater now. And it was almost like I was having nostalgia not for my childhood, but for knowing that this may be the last time I see this and how sweet it is and how wonderful it is.
Oh, well, yeah. I think you can miss places. You can miss people. I know I certainly miss places and people, but I have to say I don't really want to go back to anywhere that I've to my past. I don't want to be in my past.
I was thinking that too, Paul, because
I've had a wonderful life and it's still going. So,
Well, I had a very struggly life for many, many years, and it's just so much better now. So I don't really hanker too much to go back myself because it took a lot of work to get here,
Yeah, I think for me, because like Mary, I had a very difficult childhood and past, and but there are pieces within it that were the things that were beautiful to me or comforting to me, and so I do miss it's funny. Somebody asked me one time, "Do you miss the South?" When I first moved out here, and all those people who think like they do back there, and I was like, well.
I love those people.
Yeah, I love a lot of those people. And I said, but you know what I really miss when I miss things, I miss a few relationships like with my aunt and my mama that I really still have a pain when I think about it of missing. I kind of miss. I'm more about missing places and sort of like memories of it. Like afternoons on the porch at Dauphin Island, or like those kinds of things I'll miss.
And
at
everything's
times.
larger than life, because a lot of the time it's when you're in your childhood, and so everything's bigger, and brighter.
Or even, I mean, I still miss
It's new every day.
And one thing that I try to do at least once a day is try to experience an extreme moment of joy. Like, it can be anything, like, oh my God, look at that little flower that's over there. It can be anything that strikes me as exceptionally beautiful or joyful. And so I found that over the years, by doing that, I have a lot of those memories of those little moments of joy, the sort of random things. And so I think it's healthy, especially for those of us who had a particularly difficult childhood. Some of the therapy that I did around that was kind of rewriting the narrative of it. I didn't, undo what happened to me, but I made the story and my memory of it more of like, look how brave that little girl was dealing with this or that, or look at, and highlighting some of the things that were positive. So one thing about nostalgia is, by not being delusional about the past, but sort of reframing your past so that you don't feel like a victim or you don't hold on to anger, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah, and looking back like that also can give you tools of understanding about how you react in certain ways. It's
yes.
very valuable for your own soul growth to say, wow, I went through that, and this is what happened, and this is how I reacted, and maybe that's why I'm reacting like this when that happens. That is very valuable,
As well.
Yeah.
Something that was really interesting, I'll never forget this, when my son was 2 years old, and I used to always sit him up on the kitchen counter in our house in Mill Valley to help me cook. And frequently friends would drop by for dinner, and I had a lot of single friends at the time. So we had 3 or 4 friends over, and my good friend Michael, who Luis called Uncle Michael, and he was there, and they were playing some game, and Luis was laughing, and then Luis's father said, wow, I wonder if I was that happy when I was your age, to Luis, or if I had an uncle that was like that, I wish I could remember. And Luis says, you don't remember? And he says, no, honey, most of us don't remember anything before the age of 5. And Michael, do you remember before 5? He said, no, I don't remember before 5. And, and Luis burst into tears, sobbing, going like, I won't remember any of this. I won't remember any of you. I won't remember laughing today. And it was the sweetest thing ever when he suddenly realized, like, it bothered him for weeks. Like, will I remember this? Will I remember everything we did? We go to get ice cream. Will I remember this ice cream cone? I don't want to forget. And it was the sweetest thing of him.
I wonder if he remembers that.
No, he doesn't, I asked.
Really? Wow, you'd think
not.
If there were a little bit of trauma mixed in with the...
But I should have pinched him really hard, and then he would have a body memory or something. But yeah, the idea of memories, was, that's one thing about having a child, which is interesting to see how the mind and awareness develops.
That's the great thing about Alzheimer's, is that you can remember, you can still remember your childhood even if you can't remember yesterday.
Ooh, I don't think I'd like that at all.
I want to just put in here a little bit more from David White, because I think it's interesting what he wrote. Nostalgia is not indulgence. Nostalgia tells us we are in the presence of imminent revelation, about to break through the present structures held together only by the way we not have remembered deeply enough, something we thought we understood, but that we are now about to understand more fully, something already lived, but not really fully lived, something that was important, but something to which we did not grant importance enough.
Well, yes, that's an interesting point. I mean, yeah, all these things that Rob and you were just talking about, those are just little details, and like that letter, it's just little details. We didn't give them enough importance at the time. It was just day-to-day stuff.
And now look how important.
And now, you remember, I don't know, I remember the Walls ice cream bar dipped in chocolate, what?
It's interesting what, I've always wondered, when Luis, after that little conversation, when he was between 2 and 3, and then I would start to think whatever we were doing, I would go, will he remember? I started to wonder what memories will he have, or if his father and I were having a fight. And he woke up because he heard us yelling. Will he remember? The things I would think. I hope he doesn't remember this. I hope he does remember ice cream this afternoon.
Right.
And not the fight.
And not the fight. So that consciousness with a child of realizing you were creating memories as they grew older, and then when bad things happen, this pang I would have of like that's now in his psyche.
Right. Oh, awesome responsibility.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, this is KWMR Community Radio for West Marin, 90.5 in Point Reyes Station, 89.9 in Bolinas, 92.3 in San Geronimo Valley, and streaming live on KWMR.org. And we'd like to thank our underwriters, City Sewer Pumping, City Sewer Pumping, family-owned and operated by Butch and Mike Giamona, serving the West Marin area since 1951, providing complete septic services, including septic pumping installations, repairs, and inspections. More information on their website, citysewerplumbing.com, or on their Facebook page. Also reachable by phone at 415-663-1926. That's 415-663-1926. And Coastal Health Alliance. Coastal Health Alliance offering comprehensive family medicine and dental services, and the only podiatrist in West Marin, with health centers in Point Reyes, Bolinas, and Stinson Beach. Coastal Health welcomes patients with Medicare, Medi-Cal, private insurance, including Kaiser, and no insurance. Appointments and general information at 415-663-8666 or coastalhealth.net.
And you're listening to Let's Talk Radio with co-hosts Robin Carpenter, Mary Frank, and Paul Raffel. Please share your views. Give us a call, 415-663-8492, or tweet us at Let's Talk on KWMR.
And today we're asking, how do you feel about nostalgia? Is it a great coping mechanism or a dangerous delusion? Please call us at, when you hear me, I'm sorry, call us when you hear me say, whoops, you're on the air. Give us your first name, turn down the radio, and please watch your language.
Very good.
So it's interesting to me because most of my friends, I think both of you probably included, say that there's not a period that they really would like to go back to. I do have a few times that I would love to go back to. And the thing, when you think about nostalgia, also you have to think in terms of regret too. If you're being nostalgic in a way of looking back on something that you wish that you had more of that in your life, or your life was more like that, or could you go back and be in that space and time and make it last longer, or change decisions?
Or do a redo. Yeah.
And I definitely...
I have a few of those.
So many of my friends say, oh, I regret nothing because it all brought me here. And I'm going like, I regret a lot of things. You know, speaking of memories.
Well, yeah, regret.
There are things that I know I would have a different life if I made a different decision. And I kind of suspect it would have been a better life, you know. So I wonder if that's sort of something that most people don't like to share. But for me, too, nostalgia involves there are times when I was very aware that life was really fabulous, and everything was kind of lining up in a beautiful way for me. When I first moved to California, the first year was hard, but after that, those next couple of years were great. And so I have nostalgia mixed with I should have not gotten married to the person I married and let things go on a little longer.
But then
you wouldn't be as smart as you are now.
But yeah, well, I think I would be.
I don't think so. I mean, this is where we disagree, because I look at all the challenges, and they made me smarter. They made me weaker in some ways, but as I became smarter, I realized it made me weaker. So I worked on strengthening the bad effects of those either relationships or decisions. So I part ways with you here. I think that...
And most of my friends do. They say, oh, no, I like who I've become, and if I had made different decisions, I wouldn't be this person that I am.
Yeah.
And I think, I'd like to see that other Robin that stayed on the houseboat.
I regret going out in the sun for years without putting a hat on, but other than that, I don't know what. I'd rather not be as crusty as I am. But, you know what? The first thing that I'm going back to this, I guess it's kind of a Rockwell thing, isn't it? Going back to this, it reminds me of when Seventh-day Adventists come calling. They bring with them their little booklets that have pictures like this of, you know,
Happy
lions and lambs lying down with each other, and everyone has a little cottage by the sea with strawberries in the garden, and this is all if you're a good Seventh-day Adventist, this will be the afterlife for you. And that's like a nostalgia, looking for nostalgia in the future, looking for the past in the future. It's like this idealized, ridiculous world that they think that existed back then.
You know, something that struck me this morning that was on NPR, not that I was not listening to KWMR, I actually just saw it in writing. There's a new book out called Hillbilly Elegy, a memoir of a family and a culture in crisis by J.D. Vance. And it looks at why the white working class is broken and how that helps explain the phenomena of Donald Trump. And it was really interesting. It's a really great interview. You can just read the transcript of it. You just Google Hillbilly Elegy at NPR. It came out this morning. And it was really fascinating, him talking about, you know, so many places across the country. You know, he grew up in Middletown, Ohio, a small steel town, and what is happening to people there where these areas have been so decimated by the decline of the industrial economy. And it covers this huge swath of America, which if you didn't grow up in an area like that, you wouldn't understand that these people relied on automotive jobs, steel mill jobs. I saw when I was back home, like going up to Baton Rouge and Lafayette, Louisiana, and these areas, and up into Alabama, where the jobs had been industrial type jobs, and the unemployment's huge. The rates of heroin addiction, Vermont, you know, Alabama, everywhere, heroin addiction is way up. And so he really, it's an interesting interview because if you don't want to read the book, it gives you the insights into. They have a nostalgia of a time, but it's a nostalgia of having a job. Right. And also, he's talking about it's a nostalgia of being heard and respected that they haven't felt since then and having jobs. And so being unemployed and not having the things you need to provide for your family, and not seeing it change at all, and not having the last politician that even slightly touched on it as a major issue was John Edwards. And of course, he couldn't keep it in his pants and blew the whole thing. But he was talking about poverty and the shift. And he was saying, this is the crisis in America. You guys are being distracted. This is the crisis. We have huge numbers of people who the generational lifestyle they had has been stopped in its tracks. Yeah. And the next person to talk about it, sadly, and John Edwards warned, if you don't address the poverty then what do you get? So, and that's what Donald Trump does. And also, that culture is primarily white and primarily, you know, Scot-Irish. And the culture, if you've never read about this, but that it's a culture of respect, and it's almost an honor. So if someone attacks you, you have to attack back. You know, the Hatfield and McCoys, that stuff still goes on because it's ingrained in your cultural heritage and your epigenetics that if someone disrespects you, you are nothing if you do not stand up for honor. It's an honor-based culture, which is very dangerous. And so when they hear Donald Trump, you know, get mad because somebody said, you need to read the Constitution, and he strikes back, it doesn't feel necessarily like the guy's crazy. It's not so alien to them. So, you know, they're missing, all these people are missing the opportunities of just being employed and being respected. And the number one thing that he found in interviews was they don't feel respected. Sure. And so a lot of them don't particularly think Donald Trump's the nicest guy, but he's the first guy that says, I know you exist and I'm going to speak up for you. And so, you know, it's interesting. I think everybody should read that because it does bother me that especially...
I think politicians have been pandering to that. You know, here's the thing. So working middle class, working class, the
Those
belly of
industrial
America,
jobs,
the ones that built America and all the American industries, voted in people, neoliberals, right? I mean, Reagan, they're all behind Reagan because he was going to make America great again, right? Who was one of the architects of destroying all that by exporting, by doing world trade.
And see, I think they finally realized that, which is why saying no TPP, which is a Republican, seemingly, those trade agreements are seemingly, what, the wealthy want. But they're now realizing that all these people didn't do them good, Republican or Democrat.
I think that in terms of feeling disrespected, I don't think it's just that group of people. I think right now there's a whole lot of people that cut across all class, all ethnicities, that don't feel respected in terms of what it is to be a human being on the planet with some compassion and some loving soul, that it's very hard to work through the maze of what's going on now, no matter where you're from.
Well, I'm talking in terms of why people support Trump and this nostalgia thing. So I'm thinking, who are the people that are supporting this whole
the angry ones,
the nostalgia thing, and these are people that have not been directly addressed. I mean, I don't think you can say that Black Americans have nostalgia. They haven't had any decent, truly decent life to be nostalgic about in America. I see that as sort of a different thing, but Donald Trump is playing on this "Make America Great Again," and for us, we're like, "What?
Yeah, he's
we are
mostly
great."
But he's playing on fear. It's really fear.
And reality for these people, because these people, it is a reality for them that they have nothing, and there's nothing to look forward to, and there are no jobs coming, and and they're not in a position to change that, and they're not in a position to help their children.
Yeah. There was an interesting op-ed in New York Times last year when Trump first began with that slogan,
"Make America Great."
And he's a correspondent in Europe, and he's saying that Europe is done with greatness. They don't want anyone telling them they can be
small
great
and
again.
comfortable.
We
don't have to be big and palacy.
It hasn't been a great history for great people of great countries in Europe. They're always fighting with each other, and empires crumbling, and people, dictators coming to power. They do not want to be great anymore. So. Yeah, he thinks it's a uniquely American thing to
because I think there has to be a connection between hard work and reward, and when that is no longer obvious in your life, it leads to a kind of despair that is totally understandable and can make you very vulnerable to the Trumps of the world, because you don't have that.
Well, and also,
more, but you don't
the reason
have
Bernie was so popular was because Bernie was saying things like, he was saying, in a way, they were delivering similar messages, Trump and Bernie, in terms of no American should be working 40 hours a week of hard work and be below the poverty line, and that's why we need to raise the minimum wage. And no American should be without a job, and that's why we're going to do infrastructure.
Right.
And we
shouldn't have the highest rate of children's poverty levels in the world, but the richest country. That is like obscene.
So, I think that, what Bernie was saying as well was, things have changed so much because of trade agreements and other things. So, once again, going back, nostalgically speaking, 40 or 50 years ago, you only needed one person's income to support a family.
Yeah, so someone could raise the kids.
Yeah, and so, we've lost that completely. Families have both parents working and are struggling, and then we have so many single-parent households.
I have a solution. I think we should just raise the poverty line. This is... You're listening to KWMR's weekly Let's Talk call-in show with co-host Robin Carpenter, Mary Frank, and I am Paul Raffel. To join our conversation, please call us on 415-663-8492. Let us know what you're nostalgic for, and if you are, what you miss about your life, or what you miss about the previous ages in the world. Do you want to go back to Socrates?
As a woman, I would say no.
Philosophical thinking?
As a woman, I don't think I think I'd want to go way back before patriarchy and maybe live then as a tribal woman
The
somewhere.
pre-agrarian age.
Exactly. Before, yes, I'd like to go back and be a real hunter-gatherer. But I don't know that that's true. I think I really don't.
You like
because
your hot baths.
I like my hot baths. I like my iPhone. And so that brings a point, we talk a lot about how childhood has changed in America and not for the better, between helicopter parenting and children not being free to just run loose. Somebody did a beautiful post on the Facebook page about what her summers were like and how she could run out the front door and nobody needed to know where she was until it was so dark she couldn't see.
That
and
was my-
came
yeah.
home covered in mud and played in the woods and and that was my childhood as well. So sometimes we think, there are all these issues around, trying to bring nature back into children's lives and have children, live differently. And, so there's a nostalgia around that. But I also know that, kids, when I was growing up, because of the way it was, kids broke their arms, broke their legs, fell out of trees. I never hear, I remember when Louise was little, they had a laser tag place that the kids went and played at, and one of the boys fell and got a cut on his forehead, had to have 6 stitches, and the parents sued the place. And I'm going like, we got stitches? That was like a badge of honor. It
Yeah.
was like, yay!
My dueling scar.
Yeah, so it's, or signing your cast because you broke your leg. So it's really, an interesting thing about with kids today are feeling nostalgic that as parents or grandparents nostalgic for, we wish that they were having, childhoods more similar to what I had. Now, I will say in our community, the young people that we have a lot of babies and little ones around now and more on the way. And I see the kids, they're going down to the beach. They're covered, the Facebook photos, they're covered in mud. They're playing outdoors. The young parents in our community here in West Marin, I think, do a beautiful job of letting their children
Be children.
letting them run wild, just wild enough, and seeing these kids really growing up, picking blackberries and huckleberries and, playing at the beach and building forts out of driftwood. And, so it is watching people raise their children here and my friends that are ranchers and their beautiful children out I see them with, with the cattle or with the sheep and, seeing that lifestyle does still exist in some areas like here. But
And it's so precious because there's so little of it, and so few kids get exposed to that.
Shout out to our former co-host Raven Gray, who's
yes,
posting on Facebook these wonderful pictures of her and Zach up in, I don't know where they are, in Canada or something, in these beautiful places, living kind of wild and
off the grid.
And she's teaching him all the wild crafting stuff. It's great.
That's wonderful. And with it, I'm just going to repeat this because I was trying to think, well, what single thing? And I think it's the pace. It's the slower pace.
That's what you miss.
I do feel that has really impacted people in a very negative way, not only in their health, but their mental life, their ability to have good, deep, rich relationships. Everybody's in a hurry. They don't take time. And I do miss that. You have to and we're older, we can do it. But we sure couldn't do it for a long time, and we can only do it now by very consciously weaving that into our life because everybody else is running on fast,
Well, it's interesting because I was just saying this morning that to my husband, I said, I feel so anxious this week. And I realized last week I had a week where every single day, Monday through Saturday, I had places I had to go, meetings I had to go to, and normally I pace my life now at my age. I try to have for every, say, 2 days that I'm over the hill, 8-10 hours, I'm going to the jail, I'm going to the library, I'm doing all this stuff. I try to take a down day where I may be doing work, but it's at the house, sitting on the sofa, looking out at the woods and, answering emails or working on a spreadsheet. But I can't do, and I told Andy, I said, I feel really like I'm such a weak person now. I don't think I could go work a Monday through Friday stressful job like I had before, just day after day after day. My system has adapted to when I have a level of intensity on one day, I try to have the next day pull back a little and let there be a flow. And Andy said, that doesn't make you weak. It means that you're now living healthy. You know, you're not.
And you're older.
Yeah.
Imagine doing that, raising 3 kids, which a lot of people are doing. I just, I look back at, I said, I don't know how I did that. I do not know how, and now it's even more intense because there's even more pressure. You know?
Yeah. But speaking of nostalgia and childhood, I do think there are things that are fascinating. I mean, I think the internet's like the best thing ever. It's like we created electronic ESP. You know, we can exchange thoughts almost immediately with people, and I love that. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see what the kids are like that are growing up with it from birth on.
They're already more tuned in that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and how that creates community for them.
They'll be nostalgic for it when it's superseded by
when we have little implants. and so for me, like I actually think I would get an implant. I'd love to have it where I can just look, like think of something and a screen comes up in my head. So I also think, that we shouldn't let nostalgia block us from seeing that some new things are a great thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of the internet and because of that speed of pace, I'm actually able to work from home a lot, which is really great.
And the other thing is, especially now during this political dance, I call it a dance because I'm trying to reframe it, it's been a lifesaver because with the media corporate media so tightly controlled, it's been very, very hard to get the real deal. And because of the internet, if you dig, you will get the story. And we didn't have that.
Right. Yeah, that's true. There's more ability for activism. Susan Santiago, I was listening to KWMR this morning. And she had an interview with a man who co-wrote a book about preparing for the future that doesn't exist yet, and strategic thinking about how things are going to change faster and faster and faster, and how do communities cope with that, and how do you set up things so that you're able to change,
be really resilient quickly.
Yeah. So that's an interesting look at that. And there's a website, strategic. I think it's strategic thinking. I'll have to look that up. Anyway.
What's her name?
Susan Santiago.
Oh, on the show.
Morning,
on her show.
Pieces of Peace.
There's somebody we were talking about pace of change. I think we were talking about my Apocalypto show, one of my depressing shows. But like when Alvin Toffler wrote the book Future Shock, that actually the title of the book should be Change Shock, because we've seen that. I mean, my grandmother talked about, when they switched from horses to cars, and then planes came, plane travel, and, so she saw huge change in her lifetime, but it was paced very differently. I mean, I remember being off for 3 years after I had Luis, and I came back and everything had, all of a sudden there were faxes, and then the next thing is like there's computers, and there's and faster, and it's an older person. I do worry, can I, as I'm older, keep up with it? I hate to see myself become like out of the loop so that I'm sort of anachronistic, I
don't mind being anachronistic.
I think just being on Facebook makes us anachronistic.
I'm not going to jump into every single pile like that because it takes up too much time from things that I really enjoy, like gardening.
Yeah.
It's like you have to, my preference is to choose that which really contributes and eliminate that which really is a waste of time. You're never going to, I'm not on Instagram, I'm not on all those other things, I don't even know the name of them, but I don't think it makes me out of the loop. It just makes me interested in other things.
I guess for me, maybe I have, it's my nostalgia for my youth. I really am attached to my young friends that are in their 20s and 30s. And and I do Facebook and some Instagram, and, because that's how that's how they stay connected. And that's the only way I can be connected to them. And I would hate to become isolated from being around young people and being in a connection to them where they see me as a relevant person that they know in their life. I fear that if I don't keep up with change, I'll just sort of be shuttled off to the side and they go, oh, yeah, remember that nice old lady, Robin? Yeah, I don't see her on, Facebook version, 2030 or something like that. So I guess I do have a fear of...
but then you don't want to be the old lady trying to be the young chick,
lady.
Right?
Yeah, I think to me it's more about staying in connection. I mean, one of the great things about out here is that we don't have a lot of young people, but they're very active in the communities, the ones that we have. And so if you're at the farmer's market on Saturday morning, you're going to see Luke and Maggie and, lots of the young people and their babies. And, and so that's really nice because we are in a community where, I go over to Inverness and I run into Tess and David and the babies and,
So the farmer's market in itself is sort of a nostalgic exercise, going back to... when there were markets that farmers had where they used to sell their wares. That's kind of a nostalgia thing right there. It's a wonderful thing, actually.
Okay, we have a caller.
Well.
Okay, caller, you're on the air.
Other line.
The other green button. There we go.
Other number 663-8492, and it has been busy.
That's interesting. The red light's on. Huh.
Yeah. Anyhow, this Kareem, I
Hi,
can
Kareem.
basically agree with a lot of this stuff that when you go back to nostalgia, I mean, if I think about my childhood, it was great. But then if I really think about it, I mean, it was pretty crappy. There was a lot of weird stuff. I would not want to go back to that.
Yeah.
But I think, I go back to Denmark, and nostalgia for me is buying an ice cream in my favorite ice cream shop and going up the street and smelling the air and doing stuff. So I think it's part of it is kind of a fantasy of what was.
Oh, sure.
And I think this whole thing with Trump and his BS, I think he's buying to the fear. And I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that you get stuff out of fear. You get it out of love, you get it out of compassion, you get it out of just, working together.
Yeah.
Yeah, amen.
My input. But yeah, nostalgia, Christmas tree with real candles on and,
Wow.
Special cookies at Christmas time and all of that stuff. That's just kind of the fantasy of then.
Is that still available in Denmark? I mean, they're still doing that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, so... there you are. They're not nostalgic. They're just carrying on the good stuff.
Oh, absolutely. It's tradition.
Yeah.
We have candles on our trees, and of course I do it here too, and scare the chickens out of it.
I know. Wow.
I always have a bucket of water and a fire extinguisher.
I was going to say I'd be a little nervous.
I'm nostalgic for the Great Fire of London.
You don't leave it.
Yeah, right.
My brother, unfortunately, he lost his house to a fire many, many years ago, but that was like electric bulbs on the tree.
Oh.
They had just gone out in the garden, and there was a short, and the whole house burned down, and he got injured quite severely.
Yikes.
It's like that was for Christmas bulbs. There wasn't live candles. So.
Well, thank you, Kareem.
Thank
That's
you.
Yeah,
wonderful.
thank you.
Good
Thank
to
you
hear
for
from
sharing your memories.
Long we are lying, but I tried and finally found this other number. So,
Thank you.
That's a mystery.
Thanks.
Thanks.
okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I bet we had thousands of callers that we missed because of that. I wish to thank all of our listeners and our callers today for your participation. I hope you'll tune in every Thursday at 11 because your voice really does matter.
Yes, it does. And because KWMR does not take a stand on any of the issues discussed on Let's Talk, opinions expressed on this program are those of the hosts and callers and don't necessarily reflect the views of KWMR, its board of directors, underwriters, or members. Next week, we'll be discussing, and I'm not sure what it's going to be. It's either privatization or where do your socks go? Where does that one sock go? We hope you'll tune in then and join another lively discussion.
This has been Let's Talk on KWMR with your host, Robin Carpenter, Paul Raffel, and I'm Mary Frank.